Hi guys, welcome to episode number 2 of the most amazing HR podcast in South Africa called Working in SATV, where our lovely Shireen, the best HR in South Africa, sorry for the bias of course. Shireen, welcome to the show once again.
Yes, David, I'm sorry, I'm laughing, but yeah, you are being a little bit biased there because you're my husband, right? So thank you. And again, I just want to apologize to the viewers that my voice is sounding a little bit husky. I'm recovering from a flu, so I don't normally sound like this, guys. So just please bear with me at the moment. So in our last podcast, we closed off by explaining, when you can go to a disciplinary inquiry, either for repeated offences or for one serious offence. So, basically the employee cannot be called to a formal inquiry unless it's a serious offence or if the employee has a final written warning for smaller transgressions of the same offence, for example, a counselling written warning and then final written warning, or for late coming, as I explained further in my previous session. There is a legal procedure that the employer needs to follow before the actual disciplinary inquiry. So if the employer doesn't follow this legal procedure, it would mean that the disciplinary inquiry in terms of the Labour Relations Act is not fair in terms of the correct procedure. And, there are repercussions that can arise from that if the employee takes this further.
Right, thanks Shireen for that. So just please explain to us what is the procedure.
Okay, so thanks, David. So this legal procedure is essentially, and this is from the Labour Relations Act. So if the employer does this, then he is covered legally. So the employer needs to conduct an investigation. The employer needs to give the employee written notice of the intention to call him or her to the disciplinary inquiry. And this must also detail the charges the employee is accused of. So essentially, the employer can't come to an employee and verbally say to them, listen, you are being called to a disciplinary inquiry on such and such a date for such and such a charge. This should normally be something that the employee gives to them in writing. Okay, so guys, if this ever happens to you, and we hope it doesn't, just remember that always has to be something you get in writing. The employee must be given timeliest notice of when the inquiry will take place. Again, this differs from employer to employer or from company to company. But in normal circumstances, in most companies, it's normally a minimum of 48 hours. So you need to be given written notice normally as a minimum of 48 hours before the employer intends to take you to the actual the actual formal inquiry. If they give you 24 hours and it's in the disciplinary code of conduct that they're going to give you 24 hours, then this is unfortunately something that is in the disciplinary code of conduct. And if you feel this is not enough time to prepare, you can always ask for more time. Like I said, this is a guideline. But the company cannot give you notice on the same day of the inquiry, as you need time to prepare, and you have a right to decline to partake in that hearing. You as an employee has a right to be represented by a fellow employee or a shop steward during the hearing. So if the company has shop stewards, you can tell the company, or you can request a shop steward to represent you. You can also request another employee to represent you. Okay, you either have the choice of having the inquiry alone, or you can be represented by someone of your choice. Now remember, guys, this has to be an internal employee. You cannot go outside and get a labor lawyer or an employee relations specialist unless you have approval by the company. Normally, because this is an internal procedure, the company doesn't allow you to get, for example, a legal representative in these matters. They want it to be something that is done in-house, and it's been done with the employees in the company. So they have a right to decline this. You have the right to an interpreter. If the inquiry is conducted in a language you do not understand, you have the right to request that someone can interpret what has been said that is not a language you are comfortable with. Okay, David, do you have any questions around any of these
No,
things?
continue. It's perfect.
Are you comfortable? Okay. You and the company have the right to call witnesses to give evidence related to the offences. These witnesses can be cross-questioned by the other party. So say, for example, you've stolen in the company or you've committed an offence of stealing. And there's a witness that knows that you did not commit this offence. Then you have a right to call this witness, and this witness can be questioned by you to give evidence in favour of you. The company or the chairperson at the inquiry both has the right to either, they have the right to also cross-question this witness. The company can suspend you if offences are serious or if they believe that the company is at risk pending the inquiry. So basically the company can suspend you, meaning that while just before the inquiry is taking place, the company has the right to say to you, you are now on suspension and you will only return when the inquiry is taking place. I will go into more detail on what happens during a suspension process, and what is the legal requirements the company has to undertake, during a suspension. I'm not going to discuss this in this podcast. Okay. The other legal requirement is that you have to have a chairperson that's impartial, meaning, for example, if the chairperson during the inquiry shows any biasness or any sort of behaviors that shows that they are not giving you a fair chance at this inquiry, or that that they bias towards the employer, then you have a right to request another chairperson. But then remember, you can't, just because you don't like a chairperson, recuse a chairperson from a hearing. There must be substantial enough reasons that you do not want a chairperson. You can't just willy-nilly decide, I don't like this chairperson and I don't want him to chair the inquiry. There must be solid reasons for this decision. Okay, so basically, guys, this is essentially the procedure prior to and part of the process during the actual disciplinary inquiry. If you want me to go in detail as to what happens in the actual inquiry, you can, post it on the comments below, and I can actually discuss this in more detail in a future podcast.
I'm actually speechless because there's so much stuff involved into this.
Yeah, and the thing, David, I just do want to say, and that's a valid comment that you're making, because even though you have these type of rules, and I'm telling you, this is what the company needs to do, this is what the employee needs to do. There's so much that goes through this, and there's so much that you need to know in terms of this, both from a company point of view as well as an employee. And this is why, for large companies are always, they should always have a professional HR department in place that can handle these situations. And for small, medium enterprises, they should have, some form of labor relations, employee relations, or other HR professional or a labor lawyer, supporting them and assisting them during these matters, because, anything that can go wrong can be quite a costly exercise. And in the case of the employee, it's to basically, if something like this happens to you, is to seek legal advice, or to seek advice from a shop steward. Although shop stewards, in my experience, may not be as proficient in terms of some of the more detail that can go into this. You get very, very good shop stewards out there in my experience. Some of them extremely knowledgeable about labor laws, and if you got a shop steward like that, please use them. But if you can't, or you don't have the such exposure, use some form of legal expert in this regard when you're preparing for these cases.
No, right. Thank you, Shireen. Okay, Shireen, so my next question about this is, what happens after the inquiry?
Okay, so thanks, David. So after the inquiry, the employee has the right to lodge an internal appeal if the company's internal process allows this. And again, if there's any employers listening out there, I would recommend that you do have some sort of internal dispute resolution process, like an appeal process, because maybe it can be resolved there instead of it going outside. If there's no internal appeal process, then the employer can refer this within 30 days to the CCMA or a bargaining council if the employer belongs to a bargaining unit. Most employers that work in manufacturing can belong to what is called a bargaining council. So most of these disputes will go to this council if the company belongs to this forum. If the company doesn't belong to a bargaining council, then the employee must lodge the dispute to the CCMA. So there's CCMA branches all over Johannesburg and all over the rest of South Africa. Just basically go to the internet and Google where your nearest CCMA branch is. And basically what you need to do is you need to complete a form number 7.11. And these forms are available at any CCMA office, at the CCMA website, and from the Department of Employment and Labour. Okay. I would suggest, though, that you get these forms directly from the CCMA or from the internet site of the CCMA itself, as you may stand in queues at the Department of Labour, and then, you get to the front of the queue and they may not have the forms. I really want to add, it's such a traumatic experience when an employee is going through this, that you don't want them to have to stand in queues and not get the form. So, you can download this from any of the CCMA websites. Attached, we will now put a copy of this form up on the screen so you can see what this looks like. And this form is actually quite simple and easy to basically complete. And I will take you through the form to show you how you can actually complete this.
Okay, Shireen, so looking at this form, how, I don't know nothing about this. How can you take us through how to actually fill in this form?
Yes, it's actually not, it may look difficult, but it's actually quite an easy form to complete. So basically the details of the party referring this dispute under section 1. If you yourself as the employee, you will tick at the employee. If you've got a trade union, if you're represented by maybe a trade union, they will tick this for you, and then they will also represent you at the CCMA or the bargaining council. The form for the bargaining council is the same as this form. It just doesn't have the CCMA logos on it. Okay. Then part 1A. Okay. It's basically just your name, your surname, your length of service is the time that you've been in the company, the month you started to the month that the disciplinary inquiry has ended, your ID number, your gross salary. That means your salary prior to deductions. So it's your salary, if it's your full wage if you're an hourly employee, or it's your cost to company if you're a salary employee. Your net salary is what reflects on your payslip. So this is your salary after all your deductions. Obviously your male, whether you're male or female, your age, your nationality, your address, your telephone number, your cell number, and an email address. So your cell number and your email address is very important, to fill correctly on this form, because when the date comes for the inquiry, the CCMA would either contact you via sending you an SMS on your cell phone, or they'll send you an email. So please make sure that that is filled in correct. Okay, so then you go on to your alternative details. So here's somewhere where you can either put the name of a shop steward, someone who's representing you in the inquiry, or a friend or a family member that can be contacted if you are not available. Okay, and then the last part is just section B is just the name of the referring party, whether it's an employer, an employer's organization, or a trade union, and then they will fill in that part. There is also normally a section where you need to lodge the nature of what you're disputing, and in the case of these disputes, you will, the dispute will be an unfair dismissal, and you will just write a brief summary on the form as to what the actual dispute is about. Okay?
Thank you very much, Shireen. So guys, this brings us to the end of episode 2 of Working in SATV podcast. Shireen, thank you very much. Also for your input into these amazing matters, because unfortunately people are not talking about this, and I want to say thank you for having your time to do something like this. Really appreciate it, and I hope our viewers also appreciate, because this takes a lot of work to do, and yeah, again, I hope to see you in episode 3, and guys, as usual, this video once again will educate your mind. Stay tuned.